The summer of 1854 came to Rio de Janeiro like a sickness that would not fade. The sun pressed down on the cobblestone streets without mercy, turning the narrow paths into waves of heat that shimmered and shifted in the afternoon glow. In the large colonial houses built along the hills, thick stone walls and closed wooden shutters offered a small shield from the crushing warmth. But for the people who worked inside those homes, there was no true relief. The kitchens stayed like furnaces, filled with fire and steam. The laundry rooms boiled with hot water and scorching irons, and the courtyards roasted beneath a harsh sky that seemed to watch and judge everything below it. In one such house, sitting high on a hill with a clear view of the harbor, where merchant ships arrived and departed like uncaring observers of human misery, lived Doña Mariana Vasconos. She was a woman of great wealth and even greater vanity, a widow who had inherited her husband's fortune and used it to build a life of total comfort and unquestioned power. Her home stood as a symbol of excess. There was imported furniture from Portugal, silk curtains brought from the East, and crystal chandeliers that caught the sunlight and scattered it across walls painted in deep blues and glowing golds. Every room spoke loudly of money and status. Every surface shone because of constant labor, and every detail had been arranged to reflect the taste of a woman who believed she stood above almost everyone she met. If you are drawn to stories about strength, resistance, and the struggle for dignity against impossible circumstances, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment sharing where you are watching from. Your support helps these forgotten voices reach a wider audience. Among the unseen hands that kept the house running was a young woman named Benedita. She was 19 years old, though the harshness of her life had etched lines into her face that made her look older. She had been born into slavery on a coffee plantation in the Paraíba Valley. Her mother died when Benedita was still a child, and her father was sold away when she was too young to remember his face clearly. At 14, she was brought to Rio de Janeiro and bought by Doña Mariana, who needed more servants to uphold the standards of her growing and demanding household. For 5 years, Benedita had lived within these walls. For 5 years, she had learned the precise and exhausting rhythm of servitude, how to move quietly from room to room, how to sense what was needed before words were spoken, how to shrink herself, how to disappear, how to endure. The order of the household was strict and unyielding. Doña Mariana ruled from the top, her authority absolute and her moods impossible to predict. Beneath her were the free servants, paid workers who could technically leave, though poverty and lack of options tied them closely to the house. And at the very bottom were the enslaved Benedita, an older man named Tomás who tended the gardens and handled errands, and a 12-year-old girl named Rosa who helped in the kitchen. They were property in both law and society, their bodies and labor fully owned by the woman who lived in comfort above them. Doña Mariana had firm ideas about how her household should operate. Everything had its proper place, its exact time, and its correct method. Breakfast had to be served at precisely 7 in the morning, with fresh bread, butter, cheese, and fruit carefully arranged on the finest china. Floors were to be swept and washed every day, furniture dusted, silver polished until it shone like glass. Laundry was to be cleaned, dried, ironed, and folded with perfect accuracy. Any failure, no matter how small, any flaw she imagined or noticed, was punished swiftly and often far more harshly than the mistake deserved. Benedita learned to survive this dangerous environment through constant attention and caution. She rose before dawn each morning, her body sore from the day before, knowing that even a moment of lateness would bring punishment. She worked steadily and quickly, her hands moving through tasks that no longer required thought, kneading dough, scrubbing floors, hauling water, beating rugs, pressing linens. She spoke only when spoken to, kept her eyes lowered around Doña Mariana, and tried to predict the woman's desires before they turned into complaints. Still, no amount of care could fully protect her. Doña Mariana seemed to take pleasure in finding faults, in pointing out errors, in reminding those who served her of their place in what she believed was a natural and God-given order. A wrinkle in a tablecloth became proof of carelessness. Food that was not at the perfect temperature became evidence of stupidity. A brief sign of exhaustion became laziness worthy of punishment. The penalties varied, Sometimes they were spoken, sharp words delivered with a tone that wounded more deeply than a blow, reminders that Benedita owned nothing, was nothing, deserved nothing. Sometimes they were practical, food withheld, extra work assigned, rest taken away. And sometimes they were physical, slaps to the face, strikes with whatever object was nearby, or threats of worse punishments that Doña Mariana described with unsettling detail. On one particular morning in late January, the heat had already claimed the day by the time Benedita entered the kitchen to begin preparing breakfast. The room was suffocating, the cooking fire adding to the heavy air. Sweat appeared on her forehead almost at once as she followed her usual routine, lighting the stove, setting water to boil, slicing bread, and arranging the breakfast items on the large wooden tray that would be carried upstairs to Doña Mariana's private dining room. Rosa worked beside her in silence, her movements fast and practiced despite her young age. They had learned not to speak while working, not to key any sound that might be judged as disruption. The house was meant to function like a perfectly tuned machine, and machines did not talk, laugh, or question their purpose. As Benedita worked, a sharp pain twisted in her lower abdomen. The cramping had begun when she woke, her monthly bleeding starting during the night. She had done what she could with the little she had, but she knew the hours ahead would be harder than usual. The pain would grow stronger, and the heavy labor would become more difficult, but rest was not an option. There was no allowance for such natural needs. The work had to be done no matter the pain, no matter the discomfort, no matter how the body protested. She carried the breakfast tray carefully up the narrow back stairs to the second floor, balancing its weight while managing the folds of her plain cotton dress. The hallway leading to the dining room was lined with portraits of ancestors, serious faces of men and women who seemed to stare down with the same judgment their descendants showed to her servants. Benedita had passed these portraits countless times. They no longer felt like individuals, but like a single symbol of the world that trapped her. Doña Mariana was already seated at the table, wearing a pale yellow silk morning gown. Her dark hair had been styled elaborately, a process that took her personal maid over an hour. She looked up as Benedita entered, her eyes immediately scanning the tray with the sharp focus of someone searching for mistakes. "You are 3 minutes late," she said, her voice cutting through the room. "I expect my breakfast at 7 exactly, not when you feel like bringing it." Benedita lowered her gaze. "My apologies, Senora. The bread took longer to—" "I do not want excuses," Doña Mariana snapped. "I want competence. Is that too much to ask?" "No, Senora." Benedita began placing the breakfast on the table, her hands moving with trained precision despite the slight shaking in her fingers. The pain in her abdomen grew sharper, stealing her breath for a moment. She fought to hide it, but a small wince escaped her. Doña Mariana noticed at once. "What is wrong with you?" she demanded. "Are you sick?" "No, Senora." "Then stop making faces and do your work properly." Benedita nodded and forced her expression still. She placed the coffee pot, the cream jug, the sugar bowl, each item exactly where it belonged. As she reached for the plate of sliced fruit, another strong cramp struck. Her hand jerked without her meaning to, and the plate tipped. A single slice of mango slid off and landed on the spotless white tablecloth, leaving a bright smear of orange juice. The silence that followed felt heavy and endless. Benedita stared at the fallen fruit, her heart pounding, knowing what would come next. Doña Mariana's expression hardened, irritation turning into icy rage. She stood slowly, her chair scraping across the floor like a warning. "You clumsy, useless creature," she said quietly, her voice full of danger. "Do you have any idea how much this tablecloth cost? Do you understand the value of anything in this house?" "Senora, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "You never mean to," Doña Mariana shouted. "You never mean to be late. You never mean to make mistakes. Carelessness was never your intention. You never set out to become the endless source of disappointment that people see in you. And yet, again and again, these moments still came to pass." Doña Mariana moved slowly around the table, her steps measured and deliberate, circling Benedita the way a hunter circles wounded prey. Benedita did not move. She stayed rooted where she stood, head lowered, muscles tight, waiting for whatever was coming next. "Look at me," Doña Mariana ordered. Benedita lifted her eyes little by little until they met her mistress's stare. What she saw there was more than simple anger. There was enjoyment in it, satisfaction, a clear pleasure taken in control, in dominance, in knowing that another human being was completely powerless before her. "You are nothing," Donna Mariana said, her voice soft again but sharp with danger. "You understand that, don't you? You own nothing. You are nothing. You exist only because I permit it. Every breath you take belongs to me, to give or to take away. And still, you fail at even the smallest duties." As she spoke, she reached out and seized Benedita's wrist. Her grip was unexpectedly strong. Before Benedita could react, her arm was yanked forward, her hand forced down onto the table beside the spilled fruit. "Perhaps you need to be reminded what happens when you are careless," Donna Mariana said. With her other hand, she lifted the silver coffee pot, still hot from moments before. Benedita's eyes widened in sudden understanding. "Please, Signora," she whispered. "Please, don't." Donna Mariana tipped the pot. A stream of scalding coffee poured over Benedita's hand. The pain struck instantly, sharp and unbearable, a burning that tore a cry from Benedita's throat despite her efforts to stay silent. She tried to pull away, but the grip on her wrist tightened, holding her palm flat against the tablecloth, while the coffee continued to spill, blistering the skin, turning it red and swollen. "This is what happens when you waste my time, when you damage my things, when you do not perform your work with the care it deserves," Donna Mariana said calmly, as if explaining a simple lesson to a slow child. When she finally let go, Benedita stumbled backward, clutching her injured hand to her chest. Tears ran freely down her face, born from pain, humiliation, and a rage she had nowhere to place. Her skin was a vivid red, already blistering where the heat had been strongest. "Clean this mess and leave my sight," Donna Mariana said, returning to her chair as though nothing unusual had happened. "And tell Rosa to bring clean linens. These are ruined because of your incompetence." With her uninjured hand, Benedita gathered the fallen fruit and the stained cloth. Her burned hand throbbed with every heartbeat. She wanted to speak. She wanted to scream. She wanted to release the anger rising inside her like a storm. Instead, she swallowed it, forcing it deep into the place where she stored everything she was never allowed to say. As she walked down the hallway, moving carefully with her burden, she heard Donna Mariana begin her breakfast. The clink of silver against china followed her, the sound of someone completely untouched by the suffering she had just caused. In the kitchen, Rosa gasped the moment she saw Benedita's hand. Thomas, the older enslaved man bringing in firewood, set his load down and came closer, concern lining his worn face. "What happened?" he asked softly. Benedita could not answer. She simply held out her hand. The angry red skin and rising blisters told the story clearly enough. Thomas shook his head slowly, his face showing both sympathy and tired acceptance. He had seen this before. He carried his own scars from similar moments. He had learned long ago that their pain mattered to no one in this house but themselves. "I'll get some water," he said. "Cold water may help." As he moved toward the pump, Benedita finally found her voice, though it was barely a breath. "I hate her," she said. "I hate her with everything I have." Rosa looked frightened and glanced toward the doorway, as if Donna Mariana might appear at any second. "Don't say that," she whispered urgently. "It's dangerous. Us even to think it." But Benedita could not stop herself. Words she had held inside for 5 years, for 19 years, for every moment of humiliation, violence and steady stripping away of her humanity, began to spill out. "She is cruel because she can be," Benedita said, her voice growing stronger through the tears. "She is cruel because no one stops her, because the law protects her, because the world tells her she has the right to do whatever she wants to us. But one day—" She stopped, unable to finish. One day what? What could possibly change? What power did she have to alter the foundation of her life? Thomas returned with a bowl of cool water and gently placed Benedita's hand into it. The relief came at once, though it was incomplete. The cold eased the surface while deeper pain continued to throb beneath. "One day," he said quietly, finishing the thought in his own way. "This will end. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but it cannot last forever. Nothing does." It was a small comfort, the kind enslaved people offered one another when there was little else to give. A thin thread of hope stretched over a vast space of suffering. Still, It was something, and in that moment, something was better than the nothing she had received upstairs. The days after the burning passed with a strange slowness. Each hour dragged on, sticky and heavy, like stretched sugar. Benedita's hand healed badly. Blisters broke and oozed. The skin beneath remained raw and painfully sensitive. Rosa tore strips from an old sheet to wrap it, changing the cloth whenever it soaked through. Benedita cleaned the wound with well water, knowing there were no doctors for people like her, no proper medicine beyond kitchen remedies and old knowledge passed down in whispers. The hand would heal or it would not. It would scar or it would not. Either way, the work would continue. Donna Mariana mentioned the incident only once, 2 days later, remarking that the bandage looked ugly and should be hidden when guests were present. She said this while inspecting a new dress from the dressmaker, holding the fabric to the light and discussing its quality with her maid. Benedita stood nearby, burned hand-wrapped and aching, treated like furniture that required upkeep but no concern. Life in the house marched on without pause. Breakfast at 7, morning cleaning, lunch preparations, afternoon tasks, dinner service, evening chores, then a few short hours of rest before it began again. Benedita learned to work around her injury. She changed how she held brooms and buckets, used her forearm or elbow when her hand hurt too badly. These awkward adjustments caused mistakes. Each mistake brought punishment, sharp words, missed meals, threats of worse to come. Even the house itself seemed designed to break her. The stairs were steep and endless, forcing countless trips carrying heavy loads. The stone floors offered no mercy to scrubbing knees or feet that stood for hours at the wash basin. The servants' windows were small and high, letting in little air or light, while Donna Mariana's rooms were bright and open. Every part of the building declared the same truth. Some were meant for comfort, others existed only to provide it. 3 weeks after the burning, on a hot Friday afternoon when the city lay sluggish in the heat, Donna Mariana announced she would host a gathering the following week. It would be a luncheon for 12 ladies from her social circle, women of wealth who took turns hosting and competing to impress one another with food, decoration, and polite conversation. The announcement sent unease through the house. Such events demanded days of preparation and perfect execution on top of the normal workload. Donna Mariana summoned Benedita and Rosa to the parlor and read from a list written in her neat hand. Each item meant hours of extra labor. The house must be spotless, she said, as if it were far from acceptable already. Every surface polished, every corner swept, all silver shining, the rose garden trimmed, the courtyard fountain cleaned, the fine china brought down, washed, inspected, linens pressed with starch, the lace tablecloths from Portugal, not the common ones. The list continued. Complicated dishes, fresh flowers, extra chairs borrowed, wine purchased. The tasks grew until it seemed impossible that so few people could complete them in time. But impossibility was not an excuse, Donna Mariana recognized. The work would be done because she demanded it, because she believed she had paid for that right, because the entire world supported her authority. As she spoke, describing her expectations in detail, something inside Benedita shifted. It was small at first, like a stone sliding loose on a hillside, easy to miss, yet full of potential. She had endured 5 years of cruelty, of steady humiliation, of daily loss of self. She had swallowed her anger, buried her grief, and taught herself to endure. She had survived for years by becoming smaller and quieter and more obedient. But standing in that parlor, listening to Donna Mariana plan an event whose only real purpose was to show off wealth and position to other rich women, watching her mistress's mouth shape words that treated human lives as tools for her pride, something inside Benedita began to push back. It was not rebellion yet. It was not even a clear act of defiance. It was simply a refusal to keep shrinking. A small voice inside her whispered that this was wrong, that she knew it was wrong. No matter what the law allowed, no matter what the church taught, no matter what society called normal, this was deeply and completely wrong. That night, lying on her thin mattress in the small room she shared with Rosa, Benedita stared up at the ceiling and allowed thoughts she had always forced away to come forward. She imagined a life where she was free, where her body belonged only to her, where her work earned money she could keep, where she could walk out through a and never be forced to return. The idea felt so strange and so far removed from her real life that it was almost like imagining herself as a bird or a cloud, something not bound by human limits. Still, she held on to the thought, turning it over in her mind like a rare treasure, studying it, finding strength even in how impossible it seemed. The preparations for the luncheon took over the next week. Benedita and Rosa worked from before sunrise until long after midnight. Their hands were raw from scrubbing, their backs sore from constant bending and lifting. Their tiredness ran so deep that sleep felt less like rest and more like total blackout, a short disappearance before the next day began again. Thomas helped when he could, but his work outside the house kept him busy with his own endless tasks. They moved through the rooms like shadows, unseen by Donna Mariana, except when she came to inspect their work and criticize it. On the Monday before the Thursday luncheon, disaster arrived as a broken serving platter. It was Donna Mariana's favorite piece, brought from France, decorated with hand-painted flowers and a thin line of gold around the edges. Rosa had been carrying it down from storage when her foot caught on a loose floorboard, sending her forward. She tried to save herself and the platter at the same time, but gravity decided otherwise. The ceramic shattered across the floor into many sharp pieces, the crack echoing through the house like a gunshot. The punishment came. Me, quickly and harshly. Rosa, only 12 years old, was forced to kneel on the broken pieces, while Donna Mariana shouted at her for being careless, for being stupid, for what she claimed was the natural flaw of all enslaved people. The sharp edges cut through Rosa's thin dress and into her knees, drawing blood. Her face twisted with pain and fear, her small body shaking as she struggled not to cry out. Benedita watched from the doorway, frozen between the urge to step in and the knowledge that doing so would only bring more harm to them both. She felt her powerlessness like a heavy weight pressing on her chest. She hated herself for being unable to protect a child. She hated the system that made such protection impossible. And she hated most of all the woman who could do something so cruel and then calmly return to planning her luncheon as if nothing important had happened. When Rosa was finally allowed to stand, leaving small bloody marks on the floor as she limped away, Benedita helped her clean and wrap the wounds. Rosa cried without sound, her narrow shoulders shaking, and Benedita held her, giving the only comfort she could through touch. She had no words. What could she say that would explain this world or justify it, or promise hope? The usual lies adults tell children, that everything happens for a reason, that pain makes you stronger, that justice always comes in the end, felt sickening when faced with a child's bleeding knees. The day of the luncheon arrived under a clear sky and heavy heat. By 10 in the morning, 2 hours before the guests were due, the house was in careful chaos. Final touches were added to dishes that had taken days to prepare. Meats roasted and glazed with honey and spices. Pastries filled with cream and fruit. Salads dressed with expensive oils. Desserts arranged so beautifully they would be admired for only a moment before being eaten. The table had been set and reset 3 times until Donna Mariana finally approved. Fresh flowers filled every room, their scent mixing with food, polish and beeswax until the house smelled like a powerful blend of beauty and hard work. Benedita moved through her tasks in a state of focused exhaustion. Her body worked from habit while her mind drifted somewhere above it all. Her burned hand still hurt, though it had healed enough to use with only some pain. The bandage was gone, replaced by pink scar tissue that stood out against her darker skin. That morning, Donna Mariana had commented on it, suggesting that Benedita should try to hide that hand while serving so it would not disturb the guests' sense of beauty. The guests arrived exactly at noon, their carriages stopping at the entrance, their dresses whispering with silk and lace, their voices bright, false, and competitive, in that way wealthy women used among one another. Benedita and Rosa served them, moving quietly between the dining room and the kitchen, bringing dishes, pouring wine, clearing plates. Their presence was not iced only through orders or complaints. The women talked about things that felt both important and pointless. Who had gone to which ball, who was courting whom, which families were gaining or losing status, the quality of different merchants' goods, the failures of servants, the struggle of keeping standards in a city they claimed was becoming too modern and disorderly. They laughed often, their voices sharp, taking small, careful bites between gossip. As she served, Benedita caught pieces of conversation. One woman complained that her cook could not make proper French sauces. Another spoke casually about buying a new enslaved girl to train as a lady's maid. A third went into detail about how poor her current staff was. They talked about human beings as property with the same ease they used to discuss furniture or clothing. No one seemed disturbed by it. It was simply how the world worked, a natural order divided between those who owned and those who were owned. As the luncheon moved into its third hour and dessert was being prepared, something happened that later felt like a warning. One guest, a very wealthy woman named Donna Augusta, called Benedita over to refill her wine. As Benedita approached with the bottle, Donna Augusta was in the middle of an energetic story about punishing one of her enslaved workers, describing the discipline she had created for what she saw as disrespect. "The problem with these people," Donna Augusta said, waving her glass, "is that you must always remind them of their place. Give them even a little kindness, and they start to imagine they are more than what they are. My late husband understood this well. He kept order through strict consistency. Every mistake, no matter how small, was corrected right away. That is how you manage a proper household." The other women nodded and added their own stories, each trying to show how firm and controlling they were. The talk became a contest of who could prove the strongest loyalty to the social order, who could show the greatest commitment to control at any cost. As Benedita leaned forward to pour the wine, her hands steady despite the storm inside her, she met Donna Augusta's eyes for a brief moment. What she saw was not obvious cruelty, but something colder, complete indifference. Donna Augusta looked at her the way one might look at a jug or a chair, an object with a clear use but no inner life worth considering. In that instant, something became clear in Benedita's mind. These women were not monsters, which would have been easier to understand. They were ordinary people taught that some humans were not really human at all, and they had accepted this lesson so fully that they could talk about violence over fine meals without feeling any shame. They slept peacefully, went to church, loved their children, kept friendships, and believed themselves to be good and moral while taking part in something truly terrible. That truth was more frightening than any single act of cruelty. A cruel act could be seen as a personal failure, but this was built into everything, into culture, into daily life, so deeply that those who benefited could no longer see it. Benedita finished pouring the wine and stepped back, her face calm, her posture humble and harmless. But inside her, something had shifted forever. The quiet voice that had started speaking weeks earlier was now louder and stronger. It said that she was a person, that her life mattered, that this was wrong, and she knew it was wrong, and knowing it meant she could never fully return to silence again. The luncheon ended with generous praise for Donna Mariana's hospitality, warm promises to return the favor with equally grand gatherings, and the slow roll of carriages leaving into the heavy afternoon heat. When the final guest was gone, Donna Mariana looked around the dining room with clear satisfaction. The empty plates and drained wine bottles stood as proof of her social victory. "Clean all of this up," she said to Benedita and Rosa, gesturing at the remains of the meal. "I want everything handled properly. Wash the china and put it back where it belongs, send the linens to be cleaned, and do it quietly. All this hosting has given me a headache." With that, she swept out of the room, leaving the mess of her success behind for others to deal with. Benedita and Rosa began clearing the room. Their exhaustion was so deep that they moved like people half asleep, their bodies working from habit while their DS pulled back to a place where the pain could not fully reach them. It took 3 long hours to clean everything, to wash and dry each piece, to store it all away, and to return the house to its usual spotless order. By the time they finished, night had settled in. The house was silent except for distant city sounds, dogs barking, voices calling across narrow streets, and the low rumble of carts moving over stone roads. Benedita stood alone in the dark kitchen, her hands sunk into the last basin of cloudy dishwater, and she finally let herself cry. Her tears made no sound as they ran down her face and dropped into the water, vanishing without a trace. She cried for Rosa's bleeding knees, for her own damaged hand, for Tomas and his quiet acceptance of suffering, for the mother she never knew who died giving birth on a coffee plantation, and for the father who had been sold away. She cried for all the people whose lives were consumed by this system, whose pain created the wealth that paid for rich lunches, imported china, and silk dresses. Beneath the sorrow, something firmer began to take shape. It was anger, but not wild or useless. It was anger turning into purpose. It was determination. It was the start of a plan she could not yet name, but one her body already understood, written into the tightness of her muscles and the set of her jaw. The weeks after the luncheon settled into a pattern that felt both endless and unstable, as if the entire household stood on the edge of an unavoidable breaking point. Spring arrived in its usual uncertain way. Bright, warm days were suddenly interrupted by violent storms that turned the streets into rivers of mud and refuse. Inside Donna Mariana's home, the change of season meant new orders. Winter linens were packed away, summer curtains were hung, and every room was adjusted to meet the mistress's strict demands. Benedita moved through these changes with a new awareness, as though something had been uncovered in her mind. She began to notice things she had once accepted without thought. She heard the difference in Donna Mariana's voice when she spoke to free servants compared to enslaved ones. She sensed the easy assumptions hidden in every command and conversation. Power showed itself in small ways, in tone, gesture, and where people were allowed to stand. She noticed how the mistress touched objects with care and pleasure, yet avoided touching enslaved people unless it was to punish them, as if closeness itself was something dirty. She noticed how enslaved people were discussed using the same language reserved for animals or furniture, their strengths and flaws judged with cold distance. These details gathered in Benedita's mind like dry wood ready to burn. Still, she made sure none of this showed. She kept her usual quiet obedience, completing her work with the same skill she had shown for years. Her eyes stayed lowered, her voice calm, her movements careful and unnoticed. To anyone watching, she was unchanged, just another servant following her daily routine. Inside, however, she was changing. The anger that had formed during the luncheon was spreading deeper, linking memories and experiences into a clear understanding. She began to see her suffering not as bad luck, but as part of a large system built on cruelty, a machine designed to take labor and dignity from some people to benefit others. This understanding brought a harsh kind of clarity. If the problem was built into the system itself, then quiet endurance would never bring freedom. Staying alive was not enough. Obedience was not enough. Something far more serious was needed. She started paying attention to details she once ignored. She listened closely when Tomas spoke about life beyond the house, about parts of the city where free black people lived and worked, about communities formed in the spaces between laws. She took note when Rosa mentioned overhearing Donna Mariana speaking with her business manager about money troubles, failed investments, and the growing cost of maintaining the life the mistress believed she deserved. Benedita watched the rhythms of the house, learning when oversight was weak, when attention drifted elsewhere, and when small acts of resistance might go unseen. In the second week of September, something happened that pushed Benedita's inner change forward. It began with a bolt of costly silk Donna Mariana had bought for a new dress. The fabric was a deep blue, shining like water when it caught the light. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered by a merchant who specialized in imported goods. Donna Mariana examined it with intense focus, running her fingers over it and lifting it toward the window to admire the way the light passed through. "This cost more than you're worth," she said to Benedita, who stood nearby waiting for orders. "Much more, in fact. That means you must be extremely careful with it. I don't want your clumsy hands leaving marks or grease on the fabric." The words were spoken casually, as if they meant nothing, but they stuck in Benedita's mind like a sharp splinter. The silk was worth more than she was. An object held more value than a human being. The thing was protected while the person was replaceable. That night, unable to sleep, Benedita thought about value and how it was decided. Who chose what mattered and what did not? She knew the answer rested in the same forces that controlled her life: laws written by slave owners, economies built on stolen work, and social systems that treated inequality as God's will. The world she lived in was built on agreements that placed her below cloth, below furniture, even below the horses in Donna Mariana's stable. If you are still here, take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this story. Leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. Your support helps these important histories reach more people. The realization should have crushed her, But instead T gave her a strange sense of freedom. If the system was this deeply unjust and built on lies, then she owed it nothing. Not loyalty, not obedience, not even respect. The entire structure was false, and resisting it was not rebellion but reason, not crime but moral duty. 2 days after the silk arrived, Donna Mariana summoned Benedita to her private room for a task that filled her with fear. The mistress had decided her jewelry needed to be cleaned and reorganized, a job that required touching objects of great value under close watch. For 3 hours, Benedita sat at a small table while Donna Mariana directed every step. Each necklace was removed, checked for damage, cleaned with special liquids, dried carefully, and placed back in its case. Donna Mariana spoke constantly, explaining where each piece came from, how much it cost, and when she had worn it. "This emerald necklace belonged to my grandmother," she said, lifting a strand of green stones that glowed even in the dim light. "It came from Colombia. My grandfather bought it during a trading journey. Do you know what emeralds are worth, girl? Of course you don't. You couldn't understand such value, but I will tell you anyway. This necklace alone could buy 10 of you, maybe 15 if the market is good." Benedita's hands continued their careful work, but her thoughts were far away, counting and recounting the numbers Donna Mariana so easily shared. 10 people for 1 necklace, 15 lives for a decoration. The math of dehumanization made plain. As time passed, Donna Mariana grew irritated. The heat built up behind the closed shutters, and the close work strained her eyes. She began to complain. Benedita was too slow, too careless, not grateful enough for the treasures she touched. The criticism grew sharper until, angered by how Benedita held a diamond bracelet, Donna Mariana tore it from her hands. The sudden movement dragged the clasp across Benedita's already scarred palm. The pain was quick and sharp, leaving a thin line of blood in its wake. Benedita pulled her hand back without thinking, holding it close to her chest as blood began to seep from the cut. "Do not even think about bleeding on my things," Donna Mariana snapped sharply, her eyes fixed on the jewelry instead of the injured hand. "Find something to wrap that, clean yourself, and then come back and finish this work the right way." Benedita rose slowly and started toward the door, but something about that moment stayed with her. The ease with which her pain was dismissed, the way objects mattered more than her body, the cold command that treated her injury as an inconvenience rather than harm, stirred something inside her that she had not planned and did not fully understand. She stopped, turned around, and Ed Donna Mariana. For the first time in 5 years, she looked directly at her mistress, her eyes open and unhidden, filled with emotion she no longer tried to mask. "Yes, Signora," she said. Her voice was calm, but it carried a depth that had never been there before, a weight that Donna Mariana had never cared to notice or recognize. The mistress looked up suddenly, unsettled by something in Benedita's tone, or her posture, or the expression on her face. For a brief second, their eyes truly met. In that instant, Donna Mariana seemed to see something that made her uncomfortable, not an object, not a servant, but a person looking back at her, aware, judging, and finding her lacking. "What are you looking at?" Donna Mariana demanded, her voice sharp, edged with something that sounded like fear, or perhaps anger at realizing she felt afraid at all. "Get out of here. Now!" Benedita left the room, pressing her bleeding hand against her dress, her heart pounding with fear and a strange sense of excitement. She had not truly done anything. She had not spoken back or refused an order. There was no clear act of disobedience. She had only looked. She had allowed herself, for a single moment, to be seen as a person instead of a tool. Yet that small act felt enormous. It felt like crossing a line that could never be erased. In the kitchen, Rosa helped her wash the cut and wrap it carefully, while Tomas watched nearby, worry clear on his worn face. "You must be more careful," he said softly. Why, though all of them knew he was not talking about accidents with knives or sharp edges. There are ways to survive here, but open challenge is not one of them. "I didn't challenge her," Benedita said, testing the bandage with her fingers. "I only looked at her." "Sometimes that is enough," Tomas replied quietly. "Sometimes it was everything." The incident with the jewelry caused a quiet but real change in the house. Donna Mariana became more watchful of Benedita, noticing her more, studying her movements, finding fault where none had existed before. Small mistakes were punished more harshly, and imagined ones were added to the list. It was as if that brief moment of recognition had disturbed something deep in the mistress's mind, cracked the comfortable beliefs that allowed her to live without guilt. She could not name what had changed, but she reacted by tightening her control. For Benedita, the added attention meant greater danger, but it also brought clarity. She understood now that she could not stay in this house forever. This life could not continue. Either she would eventually break under the pressure, losing herself entirely to obedience, or she would have to escape. There was no safe middle ground where she could remain alive and still keep her sense of self. The question was no longer if she should leave, but how. Those who ran away faced terrible risks. The city was full of people willing to betray them for money. Laws made their very freedom a crime. There was little food, little shelter, and almost no guidance for survival alone. If caught, the punishment could be brutal. Public beatings, permanent marks burned into the skin, being sold far away to harsher plantations, sometimes even death, meant to frighten others into submission. But staying also came with a cost that was becoming impossible to bear. Each day in that house took something from her, wearing down her spirit, forcing her to accept humiliation as normal. The choice was not between life and death, but between two kinds of death. One sudden and physical, risked during escape. The other slow and invisible, suffered by staying and surrendering completely. She began to prepare in silence. She listened carefully when Tomas spoke about the quilombos, hidden communities of escaped enslaved people living in forests and mountains beyond the city, places where different rules existed. She paid attention when Rosa repeated whispers she had heard from free servants about abolitionists, educated people who opposed slavery, and sometimes helped those who tried to flee. Benedita memorized the house. She learned which windows opened quietly, which doors were locked at night, and where valuable items were kept that could be traded for help or safe passage. Her planning was slow and careful, done in stolen moments between chores, during brief stretches of privacy in days filled with work. She could not tell Rosa, who was too young and too scared to keep such a dangerous secret. She could not fully trust Tomas, who had survived by adjusting and enduring, and who might see escape as a threat to the fragile safety he had managed to build. In this, she was alone. She was making choices that would decide whether she lived or died, whether she remained property or became something the law refused to accept. A free black woman in a world designed to deny that such a person could exist. Late in October, on a night when Donna Mariana attended a social gathering and would return very late, Benedita found herself alone in the kitchen after finishing the evening's work. The house was silent. Rosa was already asleep upstairs. Tomas rested in his small room near the garden. Benedita sat at the wooden table where she had prepared countless meals, folding her hands and allowing herself to think clearly. To escape meant leaving behind the few people who knew her name, giving up even the smallest sense of security, and stepping into complete uncertainty. She would become hunted, a criminal simply for existing outside ownership. Her life would turn into a chain of careful risks, every day a gamble against overwhelming odds. But staying meant accepting that this was all her life would ever be. This kitchen, this mistress, this constant struggle where dignity was always sacrificed so survival could continue. It meant watching Rosa grow into the same quiet hopelessness. It meant dying one day in this house, remembered only as a line in Donna Mariana's account books, listed as lost. Property. Seen this way, the choice became clear. Not easy, never easy, but clear. She would rather die trying to be free than live knowing she would never be anything else but owned. Once the decision settled, she felt something loosen inside her chest, like breath released after being held too long. Fear remained, as did doubt and a full understanding of the dangers ahead. But beneath those feelings was something stronger. Determination, shaped by anger, hope, and a simple refusal to believe that her life was worth less than silk, gold, or jewels. She would need time. She would need patience. She would need to gather what little she could and wait for the right moment. But inside her, the change was complete. She was no longer a woman who only dreamed of freedom. She was someone who had chosen it and was now planning how to claim it in the real world. The kitchen clock struck midnight, its dull sound marking the end of one day and the start of another. Benedita stood, put out the lamp, and walked quietly to her small room. In the morning, she would rise before dawn and return to her duties. She would move through the house with the same quiet skill, give Donna Mariana no reason for suspicion. But everything would be different. Every task would be done not in surrender but in waiting, not in acceptance but in preparation for the day she would leave this house behind forever. The summer of 1855 arrived with a harshness that seemed to reflect the unrest growing beneath everyday life. Heat settled over Rio de Janeiro like a crushing weight, thickening the air until breathing felt like work. The city became an oven, driving the wealthy indoors behind closed shutters, while the poor suffered in open streets with no escape from the sun. Inside Donna Mariana's house, the heat clung to the walls themselves, and the labor required to meet the mistress's expectations became nearly unbearable. In the months after her decision, Benedita prepared with careful discipline. She watched the household closely, noting which nights Donna Mariana went to bed early, which evenings were filled with social events that kept her away, and which moments offered the longest chances for action. She slowly collected small items that might help her. A spare shawl to change her appearance, a few coins taken one by one from places where they would not be missed, a sharp kitchen knife hidden beneath her mattress. She listened to every scrap of information about life beyond the house, building a quiet map of risks and hopes in her mind. Still, planning an escape and actually carrying it out was separated by a wide space filled with fear. Each time she thought the moment had come, something changed. Donna Mariana became more alert. Household routines shifted. Rosa's constant presence made it impossible to act without putting the child in danger. And so Benedita waited, watching, enduring, and preparing, knowing that when the moment finally arrived, there would be no turning back. Waiting slowly turned into its own kind of torment, where every new day brought fresh humiliations that strengthened her resolve, while also making the danger of acting feel heavier and more frightening. By early December, the situation slipped into a deeper crisis. Donna Mariana's money troubles, whispered about for a long time, grew serious enough to interfere with how the household functioned. The business manager began coming by more often, his visits marked by strained talks held behind closed doors. As the mistress's worries about money increased, so did her bitterness. She poured out her anger on those who had no way to escape or fight back. Punishments became more common and far harsher, her patience snapping at even the smallest mistake. Benedita suffered the most from this rising cruelty. Serving a meal just a few minutes late led to being locked in the storage cellar for a full day with no food or water. A single crease left in a pressed shirt earned her a beating with a leather strap that raised angry welts across her back. Dropping a glass, an accident caused by exhaustion and the slick heat, resulted in 3 nights spent sleeping on the hard kitchen floor without even her thin mattress. Each punishment pushed her closer to collapse. Every act of violence made it clearer that staying would eventually destroy something inside her that could never be fixed. On a Thursday afternoon in mid-December, when the heat was so intense it made thinking slow and breathing eel-like work, Donna Mariana summoned Benedita to the sitting room on the 2nd floor. The mistress sat fanning herself with an expensive painted fan, her face red from heat and irritation, her dress already darkened with sweat even though the day was still young. "The heat is unbearable," she said, as though Benedita were somehow responsible for the weather itself. "I need more ice brought up from the cellar. Prepare cold cloths and make sure every window has the curtains drawn, and do it quietly. This heat has given me a headache that makes every sound feel like a hammer striking my skull." Benedita nodded and turned to go, but Donna Mariana's voice stopped her. "Wait, look at me." Benedita lifted her eyes slowly, knowing that direct eye contact often came before a new act of cruelty. The mistress seemed to enjoy watching the faces of those she hurt, as if their pain fed something inside her. "You've been sulky lately," Donna Mariana said sharply. "I've seen it. That look in your eyes, like you're judging me, like you think you have opinions about how I run my house. Do you think I don't notice?" "No, Senora, Don't interrupt me." The words cracked like a whip. "I bought you 5 years ago, and since then I have given you food, shelter, clothes, and a purpose. Without me you would be nothing, worth nothing, useful for nothing at all. Yet you stand there with that look, that quiet defiance you think I'm too foolish to see." Benedita kept her face blank, but her thoughts raced. Had he revealed too much? Had the change inside her shown despite all her effort to hide it? The danger of the moment settled around her, sharp and cold. "I should sell you," Donna Mariana went on, her voice growing faster and more poisonous. "Send you to a coffee plantation where they know how to truly break spirits, where they understand that enslaved people need constant reminders of their place. Do you know what stops me? The trouble it would cause, finding someone new, training them, dealing with the disruption. So instead, I will make something very clear to you." She stood and stepped closer until she was directly in front of Benedita. She was so near that Benedita could smell her perfume mixed with sweat, could see the fine lines around her eyes and mouth, could see how cruelty had shaped features that might once have been considered beautiful. "You are nothing," Donna Mariana whispered, her voice softer and somehow more frightening. "You exist only because I allow it. Your breath, your heartbeat, even your thoughts belong to me. If I wished, I could have you beaten until you could not walk, starved until you could not stand, sold to someone who would make this life seem like kindness. I don't do it because it would inconvenience me. Do you understand?" "Yes, Signora. Say it back to me. Tell me what you are." The moment stretched painfully long, heavy with threat and possibility. Benedita felt her heart pounding in her ears, tasted metal in her mouth, felt the weight of the choic pressing down on her. She could say the words, repeat the lie Donna Mariana demanded, and buy herself a little more safety through submission, or she could refuse, hold on to the truth she had uncovered during long nights of quiet planning, and accept whatever followed. "I asked you a question," Donna Mariana said, her hand lifting as if ready to strike. "Tell me what you are." Benedita met her eyes fully, and in that shared moment she made a choice that would shape everything that came next. When she spoke, her voice was calm and steady, free of the fear and obedience that had marked the past 5 years. "I am a person," she said. The silence afterward was complete. Donna Mariana's face shifted through shock, disbelief, fury, and then something close to fear. Her raised hand began to shake. "What did you say?" "I said, I am a person, Signora. That is what I am, not nothing, not property. A person." The slap came quick and hard, snapping Benedita's head to the side. Pain burst across her face, sharp and bright, yet distant, as if it belonged to someone else. She straightened slowly, touching her lip where it had split against her teeth, and looked at the blood on her fingers. "How dare you?" Donna Mariana whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "How dare you speak to me like that? I will have you whipped. I will have you branded. I will make an example of you that every enslaved person in this house will remember for years." Yet even as she threatened, there was uncertainty in her stance, as if Benedita's simple words had cracked a belief she relied on. For 5 years, Benedita had obeyed, had taken punishment without protest, had played her role well enough that Donna Mariana depended on it. This sudden break from expectation unsettled her, revealing weakness beneath the display of absolute power. "Get out of my sight," Donna Mariana finally said, forcing authority back into her tone. "Go to your room and stay there. I will decide what to do with you later." Benedita turned and left. Her legs were steady despite the rush of fear and energy flooding her body. She went down the stairs, passed through the kitchen where Rosa stared at her with wide, frightened eyes, and continued to the small room they shared. Inside, she shut the door and leaned against it, her heart racing as her mind struggled to grasp what had just happened. She had done it. She had spoken the truth, refused to erase herself, crossed a line that could never be stepped back over. The punishment would be brutal. She knew Donna Mariana would not let such defiance go unanswered. There would be a beating, or something worse, all meant to crush resistance before it spread. That meant she had to leave tonight. There was no more time to wait, no more careful planning. She had forced the moment to break, and now she had to act before the weight of retaliation fell on her. She moved fast, collecting the few things she had hidden away, the shawl, the coins, the knife. Her hands shook now as the reality of what she was about to do fully settled in. She was going to run. She would walk out of this house and into a city that offered her no safety. She had no clear place to go, no promise that she would survive the night. Rosa appeared in the doorway, her young face tight with fear and confusion. "What happened?" she whispered. "I heard shouting. Benedita, what's going on?" Benedita looked at the girl, This child who had suffered beside her and would continue to suffer after she was gone, a reminder of everyone she could not save, even as she tried to save herself. The guilt nearly stopped her breathing. "I have to go," she said quietly. "I can't stay here anymore." "Go where? What do you mean?" "Anywhere. Away." "Rosa, listen to me. You cannot tell anyone about this. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever. If Donna Mariana asks, you say you know nothing, that I told you nothing, that I simply vanished. Promise me." Tears filled the girl's eyes. "But what about me? What am I supposed to do without you?" It was the question Benedita had tried not to face, the one that hurt the most because there was no good answer. She was abandoning a child to the same terror she herself was running from, saving her own life while leaving someone else behind. The right and wrong of that choice were unclear, morally damaged in ways that would follow her if she lived long enough to feel the weight of it. "You live," she said, pulling Rosa into a short, tight hug that burned with urgency. "You live however you must, and maybe one day you will get a chance like this too. But right now you have to let me go. And you have to protect yourself by knowing nothing about where I went or why." She let the girl go and stepped past her into the hallway, her thoughts already turning practical and sharp. The house was quiet. Donna Mariana was likely upstairs, thinking of punishments. Tomas was somewhere outside, maybe in the garden or near the stable. The front door would be guarded or locked. But there was a window in the laundry room that opened onto a narrow alley, a path she had noticed months ago while watching and waiting. She moved through the house like a shadow, careful and soundless, alert to every small noise. The laundry room door was shut but unlocked. She slipped inside and closed it gently behind her, then walked toward the window. It was small and set high in the wall, meant for air, not escape, but she believed she could squeeze through if she tried. She pushed it open slowly, flinching at the squeal of old hinges, and used a shelf to pull herself upward. The wooden frame was rough and scraped her skin as she twisted and pushed her body through the tight space. For a second she was stuck, her hips caught, panic rushing hot and fast into her chest. She forced herself to breathe, to shift, to keep pushing until she suddenly slipped free, falling out to the alley and hitting the ground hard. The fall knocked the air from her lungs. She lay there gasping, her body aching in new ways layered on old pain. Above her, the open window stared down like an accusing eye, proof of her escape that would soon be noticed. She had to move. She had to get far from this house before anyone realized she was gone. She stood shakily and looked down the alley. One way led to the main street, bright and busy, dangerous for someone running. The other way disappeared, into darkness, toward twisting back streets and narrow paths of the old city. She chose the dark, chose uncertainty over certain capture, and started to run. Every step hurt. Her body was worn down from years of hard labor and recent punishment, but fear and resolve pushed her forward. Turning back was impossible. Behind her, the house faded into the night, becoming just another building, its hold on her life weakening with every step she put between them. She had no idea where she was going. She did not know if she would survive the night, let alone find safety. But she was moving. She was out of that house, even if she was not yet free by law. And for the first time in 5 years, her life belonged to her, to risk or save as she chose. The night closed around her, and Benedita ran toward a future that was uncertain but her own. No longer property, but a person claiming the right to exist on her own terms, whatever it might cost. Rio de Janeiro at night was nothing like the city be. Why day? Shadows gathered in doorways and alleys, turning familiar streets into something strange and threatening. The sounds changed too. The daytime noise of trade was replaced by night sellers calling out, music drifting from taverns, and the occasional shout or scream that could mean joy, violence, or drunken chaos. Benedita moved through this dark world like prey, every sense alert, every shadow a possible danger. She had no destination, only the need to get farther away from Donna Mariana's house. Her feet carried her through narrow streets she had never known, past tall dark buildings, around corners that opened into more confusion. The city felt endless and twisted, made to trap and confuse, and she realized with rising fear that she had no real plan beyond escape, no idea where safety might be, or if it even existed for someone like her. After what felt like hours, though it may have been less, she reached an area she did not recognize. The buildings were older and falling apart, poverty visible in cracked walls and broken shutters. The street was so narrow that barely a cart could pass. The smell of filth and decay hung thick in the air. A few figures moved quietly in the shadows, their faces hard to see. Benedita pressed herself against a wall, trying to disappear, trying to decide if these people meant danger or hope. An old woman stepped out of a doorway with a bucket and dumped it into the gutter. She looked at Benedita with sharp eyes that had clearly seen this kind of fear before and understood it. "You running from someone, girl?" the woman asked softly, her voice rough. Benedita paused. Trusting anyone was dangerous, but she was lost and desperate. "Yes," she said at last. The woman nodded slowly as if she already knew. "There's a church 3 streets from here, Nossa Senhora do Rosario. Sometimes they help people like you. But be careful. Patrols come through.